Thank you very much. So, first off, thank you for having me. It's been a while since I've been speaking to the ISTC audience, and so I'm really glad to be here. Really glad to be talking to you about data and authoring best practices, which, is kind of my bread and butter. And obviously, this is a little bit about me. Yes, it's my bread and butter. I've been working for the last 10 years with Soft and Ixia CCMS, so a data-based component content management systems that has been purchased by Madcap Software. And I participated over those years in global content operation projects in all kind of industries. And at the same time, I've been busy. At the same time, I was a trainer of students in various master's degree across France and a researcher. And I'm glad to say that my latest research with my colleague has been published. It's actually bilingual book, and the topic then was and is training technical writers a little bit versus technical translators. Is it a common curriculum or a divergent path? And the focus was really on soft skills. What were the soft skills that you could find out into the job postings, in these different um, offers, and what were the topmost soft skills looked at, and how you can train for those soft skills. Can you train for those soft skills? That was fun. This is a little bit about Madcap. So we are our goal is really to keep your content, your knowledge accurate and up to date for best deliveries. And so here you have like kind of a the portfolio of products. Many of you probably know Flare or have heard of Flare, Flare Online, Ixia CCMS being the DITA CCMS enterprise level kind of solution for us. And then Create, which is adopting this single sourcing and topic-based writing and semantics for learning content. All of that can be delivered through Syndicate. That's it for for the ads. Really, the agenda is fairly simple. What's up with AI? Is this still relevant? Basically, we're talking about data here. How does that, is it really trendy? And we'll see, what's going to be new if you're starting writing with data XML content, what's going to be, some things that you probably know already, but you need to enforce. And so old practices that you'll need to let go. So hopefully we'll have a lot of time at the end to really, tackle your questions. So type them in and we'll tackle them at the end of the webinar. So of course, if you go to LinkedIn today, you're going to see a lot of memes with little icons about garbage in, garbage out. So what AI is doing, it's enforcing, it's multiplying the effect of the content. Content witnesses, poorly structured, badly structured, unstructured content is found out, basically. The content quality becomes enormously important in this case. Good enough answer in a, for generative AI is not good enough for documentation. So there are risks of poor governance, the risks that are getting bigger and bigger as well, with compliance issues and brand trust that are damaged. And of course, the goal is really that at some point we'll need to modernize content foundations. And I know that as ASTC members, you're really keeping up to date with all the latest and greatest ways of doing that. If we look at content operations from start to thrive, and each step is like a business value or AI strategy, and AI strategy actually, we start, from something really chaotic to something really optimized. So I won't get through all of these stages, but the goal is really to set in place some governance around your content, workflows and processes and toolings and proper content architecture that are going to support your knowledge and that are going to thrive in the age of AI with, integration to third-party tools and feeding, your LLMs as best as possible and as efficiently as possible. So if we look at it in just a little bit in more details, we want to go to stage 3, which is automation and integration. Most of us are probably more on the productivity side. We could have a pool, but I just wanted to highlight these. Last time I made the presentation with this contemporation was just a couple of weeks ago, and we had like almost 30% for each of the stages. Obviously, here I'm talking to a different crowd. So what we want to be is somewhere around 2 and 3 and not so much around 1. Doc-centric is really that no processes, inconsistency, manual updates, limited collaboration, no style guides, no templates, really something very, very basic. So, of course, while we go up these steps and we're setting up system frameworks and processes to actually build content in an efficient way, we want to shift away from the document-centric model because the operational efficiencies are going to be through reuse at the component level, right? And we want to go away from manual copy pasting as effectively as we can. And of course, governance and standards are going to be important, and norms. So we'll go through this a little bit, looking at the DITA content, as DITA is an open architecture, but also maintained by a standard organization. The goal, AI-ready content infrastructure. I'm sure you've heard this before, and you'll hear it again a lot. So on the best practices side, so these are the new, we're starting with what you probably know already and need to enhance. So the best practices side, we're starting with 3 things: the topic-based authoring, tagging versus styling, and categorizing. And we can discuss these definitions as much as you want at the end of the presentation. But I just want to start with a little story, a little short story with an AI enthusiast saying how a few weeks ago I posted about some fascinating research on how AI systems process content and how we should be chunking documents for optimal AI performance. And the response was, we know how to do this. And someone commented, also a long-term DITA practitioner, I don't need a study to tell me the ideal chunk size. We saw this in the 90s. And I thought, a lot of what we're seeing with AI is kind of repeating the same message, basically a bit louder, maybe to a different audience. But we're pretty much in line with what we're expecting to mean when we talked about good content, quality content. So, of course, you can do topic-based authoring without DITA, and I hope that you do if you're not using DITA. But DITA enforces it because it's an XML. You're not really allowed to go around the edges. Well, you kind of, if you're really creative, you can do that. But what we have here is something that is really self-explanatory, and that is going to be a self-contained piece of information. And funnily enough, that is exactly a recommendation for a generative engine optimization as well. So topic-based authoring is chunking the content in pieces, but usually and typically you would have also a type for each of these topics, and that provides intent into what you're writing. So that's even better for AI. And so you follow through your structure with a declarative assumption that you're showing you're going to write about how to do something. you're going to write about what is something, or something to look up, like a list of bugs, a list of tool, a list of reference. And so, well, each topic obviously has a set structure that follows this objective. All right. So the goal being that you want a pattern, a recognizable structure for end users, right? That's kind of I should change that word. If you're somewhere around using ISO 8279, simplified technical English, if you're using information mapping or molecular information, if you're using templates from iFixit, I don't know, Google, you already are doing this, right? The separation between instructions and, well, instructional and conceptual information is embedded in all of these standards and norms. Obviously, chunking, what size is a good size, which was the topic of the short story earlier. Well, long enough to cover the topic, but short enough to be on point. Mostly the idea is that it shouldn't rely on external reference to make sense. It should make sense on its own. So you would have limited cross-references, for example, and you would avoid things like heretofore, or as we've seen previously, or as you'll see in the next, or that document, or, check up that information in that document, and then the person leaves and never comes back to complete the steps of the task, for example. What size is a good size? It's basically going to be like typically half a page, which is a horrible thing to say. But that's typically what we're seeing. If it's too long or too short, you probably need to look at it. Maybe something's wrong with the chunking. So here, L3 interconnect, the FPGA fabric assesses, blah, blah, blah. The interconnect allows to access something, and then we have a figure, and then we have a header for the figure, or a title for that figure, and then a little bit of text. That's probably going to be a concept. Downloading, installing FPGA software updates, numbered list, some notes, parent topic in there, tile looks like it. That's going to be a task. We're starting each points with do something, action verb. That's typically what you would see in task instructional information. And if you look at this INTX messages with a table, title of the table, and then scroll through, that's typically a reference. Tabular information are usually embedded in reference information. So, fairly easy to understand, a bit more complex when you're starting from somewhere. So the migration step is always interesting. If you think you've mastered that, or if you've not done a practical exercise to match current content with DITA, I would strongly suggest that you do this just as an exercise, because that's where you hit the underlying reasons why there were some choices made in your content back then, and then suddenly you need to probably reassess the decisions. Best practice number 2 is about the tags, the semantics. So you've heard a lot about markdown content. Markdown means that there is less information about the information. DITA is definitely a markup content. There is a lot of information around the information, around the content and the images, and everything that you're providing to the end users. So we're shifting away from style in some ways, and there are some understanding that structured content could be, you have a title with a style, and then you use this bold colored font for your buttons to be pressed. And then, so there is some kind of styling that is embedding a little bit of meaning, but we want to move away from that and we want to be really intentional. So a button to press is going to be a UI control, for example. So this is a little bit of a shift. It's not only about how the content looks, like heading 1, or, you know, this is going to be a reference, so it's going to be italic, but it's also what is this information? And that's super important for AI because they understand and they can make a difference between text, troubleshooting, instruction, hazard statement, danger, right? So tagging that information properly is super important, right? And again, structured content, not necessarily XML. So probably you're using some level of structured content. As I mentioned, there are multiple levels, but this kind of makes it easier. You have a set of, you know, tags to use, and you can use them as you wish. So an example here, we are going to see scan the corresponding end barcode. So when you're using single quotes, that's typically because you're not using bold to to add meaning to something. So in this case, it's a special barcode that you need to scan with your reader. So the number 1 scan do this, and then number 2 scan this, and number 3 is probably, you know, a comment or something to do. But we don't know that unless there is some declaration somewhere that says, or a tag somewhere that says, you know what, this is a comment in an instruction set. And the note here says, if you're unsure whether you've done the right thing, return there and try this and begin again. So that is typically not a note, but a troubleshooting information, right? So if we make this really clear, the search, the engine, generative engine or answer engine optimization are going to pick the right answer for you. Okay, other examples there, but the idea is that when you use structured data, you're teaching machines and search systems how to understand your content. So that clarity, that's what we need. We need clarity, helps brands stand out, get cited more often in tools like ChatGPT and Gemini. This is typically coming from a marketing, but the same is true for technical docs, of course. So metadata is that extra layer that we want to add and apply on top of our content to make sure that the applicability is properly carried over to the tools and systems and AI tools that we're using. So the goal is not to give that information as is to our end users. This is typically for systems only. And we want to provide links between information, right? Because you might be a little bit scared and we're like, oh, we have all of these objects and they're linked into one way or two ways, or they're used in different places. And that's in the DITA standard, really driven by the map. The map is really the table of content that organizes the topics, nests them, and that also holds a lot of metadata that is going to cascade down into these topics. So you don't have to say, for each topic, this applies to this. You can have that information only in the map. And when the content is processed, that information is cascading into the topic. So that makes sleeker information. So in this example, copyright information, product information, brand series, versions, you name it. The DITA standard has a lot of those information sets that you can use as you want. Basically, you pick what you need. You need to map that obviously very carefully with your product portfolio and make sure that it's going to match the requirements, maybe from maybe from a PIM or a PLM system that you're using, making sure that there is some kind of consistency out there. And if you're using a taxonomy tool, making sure that you're actually applying the right values. So map metadata, again, some examples. You can filter, include, exclude information based on that information as well. So you can have some sort of recipes to embed audience information or platform information or product information at a little, at a more granular level. On the topic itself, of course, semantically you have these tags that I was mentioning earlier that have meaning already. So in the instruction, it's pretty clear that we have a step with a command, and then a step with a command, do this with an image, all right? And then a step with a result and note, or a hazard statement, really should be a hazard statement here. So we're telling this is troubleshooting information, this is a result, and so on and so forth. So the machines will be able to pull that information and make it available very clearly. So if we want to add specific content metadata to the topic themselves, typically you could have keywords, for example, or index terms that are going to be specific to that piece of information. We also have a lot of information around applying taxonomies or ontologies or values. So in the DITA standard, we have subject schemes. If you're using something a little bit different, depending on your tool, you might have additional capabilities. And the idea is really that you would apply those where they need to go. So this is kind of an overlayer of information. There is a standard called IIRDS that is currently maintained by TECOM, the organization. That is pretty interesting. And if you want, what you can do, if you do have a little bit of part of your documentation and you want to try matching that to IRDS, it's pretty interesting. There is a tester, so a free tool where you can upload some of your content and apply IRDS and see how well it matches your current information and what you currently have. That's pretty cool. New practices. Well, new practices, accessibility, I should probably rename that with anything AI, right? But anything that's making accessibility better is making generative engine optimization and answer engine optimization better as well. So perfect, let's keep on going. We're doing the right thing. I'll talk a little bit about linking alternatives that are potentially specific to DITA and writing for reuse. When we look at the reason AI project fails, in the larger world, we're not talking here about TECOM, the TECOM industry specifically, but the number one reason is the quality of the data is not good enough and the amount of data is not good enough either. So, the data strategy, the metadata, just what we talked now, that's super important. There are also, content explosion, frequent updates, publishing formats, loss of brand consistency, tone of voice, etc. So the quality, the accuracy, the grooming, and the governance is really around the tooling. So if we're talking DITA, we're talking CCMS, it could be also doc as code tools, meaning you have a choice there, of course, to use whatever suits you. And of course, the delivery has to match those capacities, right? So if we look at the content itself, we just need to make sure that we're going to provide the right information, the proper fuel for those initiatives. If you're not really writing for the web today, well, you are writing for the web, you're just not really making that consciously, but you are. The idea is that you'll want to follow WAI, WCAG rules to make sure that the information is accessible. And to point, these accessibility features are going to enhance your AI results. For example, the figure should encapsulate a title or pointer to an image, but also an alternative text, and maybe can have a descriptive text. If we're talking about another kind of annoying thing in content, this is tables. Tables can be very nightmarish for visually impaired people, and their tools, their assistant tools, because we're not really declaring which lines or columns are really the header. And so the order of reading the cells is complex for them, and it's not really, matching what we want to say. Using proper lists, making sure that your content is not captured into images only, that's very important. Another new practice is going to be the link. So again, it does reside a little bit into this topic-based idea that the content information should be self-contained. So we don't want to assume the context of the topic because that topic could be reused in different places, and it's exactly what's happening with a lot of the semantic database. They're chunking the content again. So we would avoid to cross-reference directly to another topic. We would avoid to have an information set needing another information set in order to make sense to the user, right? So in the DITA writing world, that means that instead of adding links at the end of a topic, or even worse, inside the topic, inline, we would use something at the map level again, that's going to create links between topics directly and automatically. And so you don't really have to maintain them manually. And reusing content. I mean, that's the big thing. We want to have consistent content, content messaging. And one really easy way to do that is by reusing content. So it's sort of the next stage after copy paste, and make it easy for you. So I'm using a little bit of a food metaphor here, or a cooking metaphor, doing caramel, chocolate mousse, or profiteroles. So kind of, easier to the hardest, at least for me. And the bigger the reuse, the easier it is. So with DITA, you don't have a limitation in the nesting. You can have maps, nesting, submaps, nesting, submaps. And so you can really have chapterized reuse in a sense. So instead of pointing to each of these individual topics, you can group them together and bring that in with just the one click and the one link. Reusing fragments, typically that would be reusing, repeated instructions, hazard statements, anything that's below the topic, basically. So smaller than a topic, micro content kind of level. And reuse with key would be the profitable value, but you don't have to choose one of these. You can make all of these. And typically on your style guide, you're going to have, hey, when do we use a submap? When we do reuse a fragment, which type of content is available as fragments to reuse, and which type of information do we reuse through keys, which is very powerful, but needs to be properly managed, of course. So the idea is really some words of advice here to start simple with the bigger blocks, and then also organize your content. If you do have these information are going to be sensitive, and when you need to update them, you need to update that everywhere. Well, split them from very intentionally from the content to reuse, from the content for production, sorry. So set the reuse, and set the production content. Test and document your architecture changes. So all these choices you're making into how to do things and what type of information goes where and how it should be reused or not should be part of your style guide. So again, a little bit of a wise word, easy, entire topics, blocks, text segment, image, letters is almost impossible. So there is always this old joke coming around saying, hey, you could reuse, each of the letter of the alphabet and you have a super reuse, but how useful and manageable that is. So because you can, doesn't mean you should. And that is kind of true for everything related to DITA. So now it's time to go into the practices that we're going to let go of a few things. And these few things are DTP layouts, ownership of an entire document, and proprietary architecture specific. So if you're using something or a tool that has specific ways of doing things, that's probably something you'll need to reassess in line with what is available with the DITA standard and your new tooling. And it's doable. A lot of people are using, single sourcing and structured content to do that and to step away from styles. And there were there are some studies out there that showed almost, some teams spend 50% of their time just styling the content. This should be a darker blue. That indentation is a bit small. The size of that font is wrong. So we want to step away from that. So, and actually, customers of ours did the test with different teams. They were writing different types of content. And there were different teams basically. So some of them were 70% doing that part of styling, and other only 30% of their time spent on styling. So you could say you can already understand that there were differences even within the same company with these different teams. But it's important to step out of this styling business and let the automation work for you, right? We don't know how generative AI is going to, ChatGPT is going to show our content. Do we care? No. Or a chatbot? Do we care? Not really. So really, it's time to let go. Sometimes, depending on the tools, you may have something that is a bit easier to read, and typically all of the modern tools will have that for you, for DITA content at least. And so make it all sustainable. Well, the idea is to create a framework, again, a DITA style guide that is going to be what you need and how you're going to use the tags and the topic types and the maps and the metadata to make sure that you have the proper templates and that everything is documented in the proper style guide that your writers are going to be able to use. Okay, process-wise, you've been through this through all the latest webinars with ISTC, but document your content lifecycle, the different steps, what quality it matches at each step, what is a draft, what is a reviewed information. And of course, if you have a tool, that's going to be also part of your workflows, and making sure that the team and all people involved into the content development are properly notified when they need to do something on the content. Get help. There are lots, because DITA is an open standard, means that there are all kinds of different tools and all kinds of different options to learn about it. The technical specifications themselves are entirely accessible. I do have them listed with the resources at the end of this presentation. There are self-learning websites in different languages. There are sample content and templates. One has been made by my comrade Keith Shangley Robert, He did some tests into converting content with AI as well, and without with a pilot training guide that is available. Now, having said all of this, even with best practices, even with a good architecture, you can still create horrible content. So be careful when you end up in one of these fixed. So many conditions in your content, you can't read it anymore or manage it easily. There are so many folders or branches that you can't find anymore, which is the authoritative version. Oh, this is a big no-no for everyone involved in TechOn. The wall of content means chunking is wrong. There is no proper topics. It's just a brain dump, possibly, and does require a little care and love. So many links that you keep hoping and hoping from one topic to the other that you're going to find the actual answer to your question. Now, that is a good one. No semantics, no topic types, no intent made clear in your content into what this is about. And that goes hand in hand with the templates really tell you this topic is an instruction and I recognize it right away, right? Mismatched, inconsistent information, no applicability of your information, so missing bits data. It's still possible to do that with a great architecture, so watch out. And that's it for me. I'm not quite sure how much time I took. I've been pretty quick. I'm happy for that. We are going to have a little bit of time for the QA. You can reach me out on LinkedIn or through my email if you want to discuss all of these. I'll be very happy to discuss with you. And that's it for me.